Hello, Whitney. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. Can you share a little bit with our audience about the work that you're doing with Boston Consulting Group?
Absolutely. So yes, I'm a managing director and partner with the Boston Consulting Group with BCG. The work that we've recently been focusing on is through a partnership that we have with the World Petroleum Council. And it's a report that we release every 2 years, which is very much focused on understanding and supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion in the energy industry. So recently, towards the end of September, we released the third version of the report, which was really focused on understanding how the energy industry is advancing DE&I, the programs that different companies are putting in place, the effectiveness of those programs, and overall how the industry is doing when it comes to diversity.
So the question is, how where do things stand overall when it comes to DEI visibility and progress?
Yeah, so we know through our research that DE&I is a critical priority for many energy companies globally. However, the industry is still lagging when you look at other major sectors. So, if we look at, for instance, the representation of women in the industry, it's sitting right around 22-23%, which is low when you compare it to other major sectors. The unfortunate thing too is that we're not seeing a ton of progress. So one of the benefits of our report is that we're able to look at longitudinal data because we started the report in 2017 and this is the third version. Overall, what we're seeing is that there is some progress when we look at, more women in senior leadership roles and other dimensions. But in terms of overall representation, it's sitting still at right around that 22-23%. So we know that there's still a ton of room to grow. But I think, coming out of this year's report, I think we saw some promising data on some of the effectiveness of the programs and policies that have been put in place that organizations are trying. So, still a lot of hope, still some progress to be made.
Hmm. And when we talk about organizations with high levels of women in senior management, they tend to have a certain foundational DEI program in place. Can you kind of elaborate on these types of programs and explain how they contribute to improving diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about these types of programs, I mean, as you can imagine, there's a huge spectrum of things that companies can do.
Mhm.
One of the first and foremost policies and programs that we see being very effective is just having a really clear commitment from the top. So making sure it's clear that the organization is actually committed to supporting diversity. This can be done through, appointing a senior leader that has diversity in their title or that has clear accountability for supporting and advancing diversity. Or it could be, announcing public targets. We've seen many organizations actually have public targets when it comes to representation of diverse groups, either on their board or on their leadership teams. So number one is really having that kind of commitment from the top. Number two is having an operating model and just being set up to really support the attraction, retention, and advancement of diverse groups. So this can be anything from, recruiting efforts to policies around promotion slates and how you're actually making promotion decisions, and retention policies. So making sure that you're actually monitoring the retention of diverse groups and putting in programs to actually do so. And then there's even more foundational programs that we've seen. One, for instance, that has been a hot topic, especially in this year's report as we've come out of COVID, is around flexible working policies. So different policies to support different working models to make sure that diverse groups are actually retained and that they're having the model and are able to work in the model that keeps them at their organization.
And from the work that you do through consulting, are there any examples of energy companies that have kind of successfully harnessed, the benefits of DEI or even like, balancing it all, especially in the times where a lot of places are getting rid of these types of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that our report looks into is, for organizations that have high representation of diverse groups, for instance, in senior leadership roles or overall, is what are the programs and policies that they typically do have in place. So
Mm.
really understanding, what is the correlation between high representation, very successful diversity efforts, and the actual programs and policies that they have in place. Like I mentioned, hot topic is around flex work. So what we saw coming out of the report is one of the most highly correlated programs to have in place to have high representation of diverse groups is actually flexible working policies. We know that many diverse groups, so especially women, at critical junctures in their career, need to potentially make a decision to optimize to be closer to home and maybe not take a remote working position. Flexible working policies can allow them to do that. So that's one example of a program that we see very, very highly correlated with successful diversity efforts. Unfortunately, what we also saw in the report is that a lot of companies are actually considering removing these types of programs and policies. So one of the kind of calls to action that we have for the industry and energy organizations globally is to reconsider how they're thinking about flex work in the long term. So, it was effective during COVID. We saw some advancement when it comes to diversity. We know that there's high correlation with successful diversity or higher representation of diverse groups. So considering keeping those types of programs and policies in place.
So the report mentions a link between gender diversity and higher financial returns in the energy sector. Can you kind of share more details about this and the ROI on DEI?
Absolutely.
Lots of letters.
So, I think the business case is honestly quite clear, and it's not just seen in the energy industry. Organizations across sectors that are more diverse have better returns. So when we look at diversity at the board level, we see a correlation with higher stock prices. When we look at diversity overall across sectors, we see more innovation. So that in our view, the business case and the ROI on diversity is very clear. This is especially true in the energy sector. So, we look at some of these industry or sector agnostic metrics, but then when we double click on the energy industry, it's the same. So we see a similar correlation that organizations with higher representation of diversity tend to do better when it comes to business results in terms of financial performance. So in our eyes, the business case is very clear.
And Whitney, to kind of help wrap it all together, is there anything else that kind of stood out to you in this report that you want to share with our audience, and any kind of final thoughts as well?
Yeah, I think many organizations are at very different starting points, right? And not the solution is not a one size fits all approach for organizations. When you think about different geographies, different compositions of the workforce, even just the type of work that they're doing in the energy sector. I think when organizations asked us where to start, I think it's about actually understanding the starting point. So understanding representation within your organization, taking a look at your own data, listening to your employees, understanding, what types of programs and policies do they view as being, very attractive that potentially would keep them, and then really understanding what that looks like for diverse groups. So I guess a little bit of a call to action for the industry folks that are listening to actually read the report. There's some interesting learnings about different programs and policies and things that energy companies can do to support DE&I.
And for anyone who's watching, like you said, if they want to view this report, how can they access it?
Yeah, so it's available online at, I don't know, I don't remember the actual URL.
Okay, we'll cut that part out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're fine.
Do you want to re-record that question? I can quickly just say it's available online. We'll post the link.
I can do that. Okay. Yeah. All right. And Whitney, where can people find this report?
So it's available online. So I do encourage everyone to go visit. We'll post the link, and you can access the report as well as some of the infographics and data that we've been able to gather through the development of the report.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Whitney, for your time, and thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for watching The Advocates. Download the app in the Apple or Google Play Store to stream us live, and you can even subscribe to our YouTube channel. For The Advocates, I'm Aaron Dean.